Bam. Is it recording now? Okay, cool. All right, cool. So welcome. If you're here, you've probably been here for the last couple of weeks. We've been for the last couple of months. This is our third session in our youth collaboration mini series. Just talking about how we work with youth and young adults. We'll get today. We're going to be focusing a lot on kind of best practices for hiring youth and young adults with lived experience. And we'll jump into who we are. I am Ria Zon Morris. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am mixed and white presenting, based out of Spokane, Washington. I'm one of the HUD technical assistants that has been working with your Youth Homelessness Demonstration Program team, awesome folks at your COC, to pull together the YHDP project that has just been amazing and wonderful work we've been doing alongside y'all. Erin, I'm going to let you go, and then I'm going to take it back.
Thanks, Ree. Hi, everyone. I'm Erin Rutherford. I use she, her pronouns. I am based in Louisville, Kentucky, and alongside with Ree, I am a HUD technical assistance provider with ICF and helping with Riverside. Nice to be here with you.
Awesome. Thanks, Erin. So there's a quote on this screen. I got kind of well known in my community for saying this all the time, which irritated some people, but whatever. So, we always hear that phrase, we're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. And when we talk about hiring youth and young adults, we talk about hiring anybody with lived experience to come work in this system, that it's not really about rounding the peg, but rather squaring the hole. Because our work is really to build systems that adapt to individuals rather than trying to force individuals to assimilate into systems, right? So when we're talking today about best practices for hiring youth and young adults, we'll be covering a number of topics: hiring practices, what trauma-informed policy and procedure can look like in your organization, and then how we might approach supervision when working with youth and young adults. So that all said, that's our agenda for the day. Erin, no, I'm sorry, I did this backwards. We're doing intros now. So if y'all want to share your name, pronouns, race, what your community role is, and what skill would you share in a skills exchange group? So like if you were working with a group of folks that were like, are y'all familiar with like a skills exchange group? Okay, quick overview. You work with folks that have different skill sets. They come together and say, okay, I'm really good at public speaking, so I'm going to do like a lesson or class on public speaking with this group of folks. But then I'm not super good at, let's say, I don't know, crocheting, and someone is really good at crocheting. So they're going to come in and bring crochet and teach how to do that. So if y'all want, you can drop in the chat again, names, pronouns, race, community role. What skill would you share in a skill exchange group? And I'd love to hear from a couple of folks if anybody wants to be brave and come off mute. What skill would you share in a skills exchange group?
I'll say something. This is kind of silly, but something my husband always tells me is that I am really good at folding t-shirts. I have a special method and it gets them really tiny and you can fit a bunch in a drawer and they're really organized, so that it's definitely a organizational tip. So that would be mine.
I'm gonna need to hit you up before all my work travel starts. Help me pack a suitcase. Anyway,
I can go, Ree.
thanks, Monique.
Hi, folks. My name is Monique Guerra, pronoun she, her, hers. I'm Hispanic. My community role is I'm the homeless youth coordinator with Riverside County Continuum of Care. What skills would you share in an exchange group? I think probably, I know you used it as an example is public speaking, but I think I would use public speaking for sure, and maybe like collaboration and network and how to speak to folks. I think knowing how to be mutually beneficial in spaces and knowing how we work together and what people's strengths are always a good way to go about conversation. So I think that's a big one. And I know the YAB would agree because I talk about it in a lot of YAB meetings. So probably collaboration and network, rubbing elbows with the right folks.
I love it, Monique. I that me and you, girl, we can get together. I do that work all day, every day. I love it. Anybody else? Anybody else
I
want to
could
share?
go.
Go
I
ahead.
could go. My name's Lucy. Hi, everyone. Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Lucy Razzo. I am the EOPS Care Next Up Guardian Scholars Counselor at Myrna Valley College. That's one of my roles here at Myrna Valley. I'm actually planning play dates for the kids. Right now my kids are off summer, so I have a full schedule of events, free events for all the kids, their moms and stuff. We just get together. And so they laugh at me because they're like, seriously, you have a calendar ready for everything and everything's free. So, and I love to plan events. So I would say that's what one of my skills.
Oh, I love that, Lucy. That's an invaluable skill. Event planning is not for the weak. It involves a lot of work. I see in the chat we've got a couple of folks who've dropped some things. Savannah says that she's a YAB member, planning and keeping an updated calendar. Please, I need your help with that. We have Socorro Gomez saying setting up new programming. Let's see what else. Am I missing anything in here? I know Megan said she could do a macrame plant hanger. Did I see that right? Yes, I did. I don't know, anything else? Ooh, somebody here's got where did it go? I just saw it. Ebony, critical thinking and problem solving. Here for that. Super here for that. Actually, Ebony, we've gotten to see that in person. You are very, very good at those things. And then Reverend Charles from Mercy House is saying maintaining a positive outlook. I love that. Networking and transformation of others for Michelle. Y'all got some skills in this group. Y'all should hang on to this chat and maybe get you a little like COC skill exchange group going on. We did that during the coordinated interracial equity initiative with HUD. We started a lived X skills exchange group, which brought together the TA who had lived experience as well as all of the members of our communities that we were working in who had lived experience and expertise of homelessness. And we met monthly and we learned a lot from our community members. We were able to share our own skills, and it was a really great opportunity for us to create community and bonding and to build relationship, right? So y'all might really like hang on to this chat and see what these amazing skills are that could be shared throughout your community. Nikki, baking and candy making, we know. Ooh, them chocolate covered cherries, y'all. I dream about them. Awesome. Well, thank y'all so much. Okay, well, Erin, I'm gonna let you take us through our commitments today if you're down.
Thanks, Ree. These are the same commitments that we've done the past 2 sessions if you've happened to be with us previously, but if this is your first time joining us, we can do a quick review. So our commitments today are that we welcome discomfort and honor the wholeness of one another. There might be topics that Ree talks about that are here. So we just want to make sure that, that is a welcoming space. And, to the second point, to welcome that curiosity and questions that you might have as you're sitting through any discomfort that you're experiencing. And then lastly, we also welcome one another to be here today, however we can best show up. Unfortunately, Ree's not feeling well today, but in typical fashion has, shared that vulnerability with us. So we invite you all to do the same as well. Ree always says we are all whole humans, and so definitely want to create the space for you all to be yourselves as well.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Erin. All right, y'all. Well, let's dive into this content. I'm super excited to be walking through some of this with y'all. Like I said, today's session is not going to be quite as long as the last 2. We really have been building up to this, right? So we first started with laying out the foundations. And if you have not, if you were not able to attend the first 2 sessions, I believe, Monique, correct me if I'm wrong, if they're not already up on your COC website, I know for sure there's a link to the recording. So yeah, go ahead.
Yes, there is, and I'll go ahead and drop that link in the chat. And then after this meeting, we will send out where the recordings can be found, along with the recording for today and any additional PowerPoint slides and notes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Monique. I really appreciate it. Y'all, your COC team is just, y'all are really, I don't know if you realize how amazing they really are, particularly with the lift that YHDP has been. And I cannot praise Monique particularly. I just cannot praise enough, but all of that YHDP team, y'all are just amazing. So today, so we started off in our first session talking about kind of getting some shared foundational information, shared knowledge, right? That we're starting on it from the same place, whether we may not necessarily have all agreed with it, and that's okay, but really getting just this, like, from this framework, we're introducing these concepts of like white dominant culture and how that shows up in our work. We introduced concepts of adultism and how that shows up in work with youth and young adults, the ways that our culture tends to kind of favor or highlight this idea of, like, father knows best, or like you'll understand more when you're older, and really how that dehumanizes the young folks that we walk alongside every day in this work. And so from there, we went into last session, which was just a couple of weeks ago, really talking through working with the YAB. Y'all have a youth action board. There's a handful of members here today, in fact, which I love. If y'all have not had a chance to do any work alongside your youth action board in Riverside County, I highly recommend you reach out to these young folks because they are phenomenal. If you look at the coordinated community plan that was submitted, good job. But if you look at that coordinated community plan, things like that mission and vision for your community they were completely drafted by the youth and young adults doing this work, right? And they're here right now. So again, if we're going to be shouting folks out, let's shout out your YAB. And so we talked a lot about kind of how trauma can show up in our work, how it affects the way we're able to navigate, the ways in which kind of trauma of experiencing homelessness, particularly in the age group of TAY, right? So we're talking transition age youth, which is going to be 17 to 24. There's a lot of science behind kind of just the brain development of where folks are at that age, and how very often many people had kind of a safety net, right? To go, not everybody, let's be clear, y'all know I didn't, but a lot of folks did have that opportunity to, like, kind of go to college and maybe make some mistakes and have mom and dad there to pick up the pieces, or just mom or just dad, but had some type of, like, safety net to support that evolution of we're going to stumble through growing. And oftentimes the youth and young adults we work with, like, either don't have that safety net at all, or we are that safety net. So last session, we talked a lot about, like, what does it look like to do this work and do it really with integrity and with authenticity, and with dignity, offering the wholeness of dignity to the youth and young adults that we work with. So this session, after all of that, is really going to be talking about what some best practices are around hiring youth and young adults to come in and really take a seat, not just at the table, right, but being a part of decision making, being a part of design of program, being a part of implementation. I believe you have a couple of on your CCP. There are a couple of roles that y'all are hoping to hire youth and young adults into that work. And if you don't specifically, because I know this is a COC wide training, if you don't specifically work with youth and young adults, I want to really impress upon you that a lot of what these practices are that we're talking about today apply really and really they should apply to everybody. This is the goal, right? We're talking about trauma-informed care hiring practices, but can also apply to hiring other people, other folks, maybe outside of the youth group that have lived experience, whether that's peer support, whether that's hiring somebody into program management. And so, sorry, I got distracted by the chat. So now that I've given you that big long introduction, we'll talk about, I didn't realize I hadn't moved the slide over yet. Sorry, y'all. Hiring practices. So there are a few things that can be big barriers for folks with lived experience in hiring. And so we're going to kind of look at that, and especially for youth and young adults. And we're going to look at ways to, these practices are really ways in which you can incorporate and collaborate, design, particularly walking alongside the YAB that you already have. Y'all are really lucky in that you have a group of youth and young adults who are here to advocate, here to build, here to design, and here to lead, right? And a lot of communities don't have that as a starting point. So this is a really awesome opportunity for y'all to really further engage YAB. Again, whether you work with that TAY age group or not, if you are wanting to hire folks with lived experience, if you are wanting to hire young folks with lived experience, engaging the YAB in the kind of hiring process and practices can really enrich the opportunities that folks can have in order to get into this field and start doing this work. a few things that can be challenges, right? So when we look at the requirements for hiring, education requirements are often a huge barrier. We all know this. I mean, if I'm honest with y'all, I don't have a degree. I'm 21 credit hours away from finishing a bachelor's degree, and I do this work now because I got very lucky, and I got offered opportunities and I took them at every step of the way. And a big part of that was that they valued my lived experience as someone with lived experience of youth homelessness, right? I was a street kid from 17 to 24, hitchhiked around the country for a while, settled in Austin where I was on the street like Mama Ree on the drag for a few years before I finally kind of got into my trajectory. The um, only way that I was able to begin working with the Austin Youth Collective. So for those who don't know, I was the like Monique of Austin in round one, right? So how Monique is kind of the YAB coordinator, works with the youth and young adults, does that work of youth coordination, not necessarily solely with the YAB, but in other spaces as well. Um, that was me in round one of YHDP in Austin. And it is because they weighted the years of lived experience of homelessness was weighted at the same, and to some people, but not necessarily HR, but to some people was weighted greater than that kind of access to formal education. We have to remember that education, particularly what we consider formal education, is very much designed to be about who can access it and how. We like to say that the American dream allows all of us to do anything we want to do if we just put our minds to it. We also know the reality of things like the zip code that you grew up in, things like the level of poverty you may have grown up in, the level of access to good schools, whatever that means. Things like even just growing up in service deserts, food deserts, that a lot of factors impact people's access to formal education, the way we view it. And that's why we've got, Megan and CEH, and I'm sorry if I did that backwards, I'm dyslexic, and y'all's community is really working actually to make formal education more accessible. And that's an incredible thing to be doing. And also, however, can be a barrier when you're looking to expand your hiring practices. So working with your HR, because the other thing, right, is advocating to funders. There's a list here. And this kind of maybe goes all over the place, and I'm sorry for that. But the other piece is advocating for funders, to funders. If you are not someone who is in a position of hiring, that's not your job, but maybe you're somebody who's like an executive director, or you're somebody who's like a grant manager, you're somebody who is working in development to raise funding. Oftentimes the restriction on education doesn't come from the actual like organization that you work for, but rather comes from the funding source that is paying for the position. So oftentimes it's about advocating to those funders the value of lived expertise and lived experience and what that really means. Because remember, we say people with lived experience and people with lived expertise, but really what that genuinely means is we're talking about people who are internal systems experts, right? When we use that term, you've heard Isaiah say it before. That really means like we're talking about folks who have walked through these systems and know them better than anybody else could that has not walked through them because they have experienced it, right? And so really wanting to push the like value of what that means. And the thing is within your organization, you're going to have to sell that also to a lot of folks in the organization, right? The value of lived expertise. Very often that can be seen by many people as like a box being checked, or how, oh, I don't want to get too political, but it can just be seen as, we're giving away something to somebody who didn't earn it or deserve it. And we have to do all this extra work, and they just got it because they used to be homeless and like all this stuff. And so really it's about working too within the culture of your organization, and ensuring that the culture of your organization truly values what lived expertise means, and how it can inform the work that you do. And finally, because we have these barriers around educational or formal educational requirements sometimes, looking at utilizing references, like really leaning into that when you're creating an application, obviously have people submit their resumes, submit their like history, but really utilize that point on references. You could even expand it, right? Like put heavier weight into saying like, if you've done, volunteer work, if you've done work in the community, really looking at what what is a reference and what work do you value, right? So I have 25 years of experience doing anti-racism education and activism and advocacy. However, that's all like local community work, right? So a lot of places may not value that because these are grassroots organizations that I have this history with, and these are not your traditional sources, right? So really thinking when you're creating these positions or creating these applications, thinking kind of outside of the box, of outside of what are these traditional, outside of like what are the traditional accepted things, right? And how do we really expand that to achieve finding the right person for the like for the role, right? I will never advocate that you hire a person with lived experience if they are not a good fit. That is tokenism, right? And so giving people an opportunity to show how they fit, and show what they do and what their background is that's the key to what it means to really be like truly authentic. Like, I hate the word authentic now because everybody uses it, but like that is what it means, right? Is like, I don't want you to hire me just because I used to be homeless. I want you to hire me because you recognize I bring value and skill, right? That just happens to also be informed by this lens. So that's a lot on job requirements. I'm going to talk on each one of these topics on the screen. Does anybody have any questions real quick though, before I like move on to postings and scorings, or excuse me.
I just want to say thank you for all your transparency. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you. Okay. Well, okay, cool. If you have other questions, they pop up, y'all can always reach out to me via email. This is just really high level. If you decide in your organization that you really want to pursue this, we have, we can do a little more like kind of like supporting your organization and what that could look like, beyond just like having this training. Though you will have access to these slides, which just kind of give you reminders and things to think about. So when you're in hiring practices and you're looking at things like job postings, expanding your job posting process beyond your kind of typical network, right? So when you are like that, and we all know that this isn't just for hiring youth and young adults, this is for hiring anybody. We want to look at like what are kind of some non-traditional places that we might be able to post our jobs, and that's looking at like social media, particularly working with your local youth and young adult providers. If you've got a job posting that you're really interested in hiring a youth or young adult for, really getting flyers up, QR codes where people can apply, putting them up in like drop-in centers if you've got them, putting them, giving them out to case managers to let them know like, hey, if you've got a young person that you think might be a really good fit for this or might be interested in it, this is an opening, right? Be careful with that. You don't want people to gatekeep that opportunity, because that's another kind of thing we have to be real cautious with when we're working with youth and young adults, is that the culture of our system has a tendency to kind of find the good ones, or try to like have the ones that are like I don't know, I know that sounds gross what I just said. I'm saying that as someone who has been that person, right? Like the one that's like, oh, they used to be homeless, but also they like check all these other boxes that make us like look good, and so we're going to really give them everything they need, and then kind of you're not seeing the value of any other person who might really be a good fit for the role, maybe needs a little bit more support, or maybe needs less support in different ways. And so just be really careful not to like tokenize or kind of have pre-decided, like, so when you do tell, like, if you're going to give this out to local youth and young adult providers and word of mouth and things like that, to just be really mindful that like this is an opportunity open to anyone who wants to apply for it, right? Now, in the case of a case manager, it might be they know a young person who is looking for a job like this, right? Or is looking to do this work and just doesn't know where to go. In that instance, you would be like, yeah, pass this along, but just be mindful not to go like, oh, find the really like the ones that you think are good, because that is gross what I'm saying. And it's also a reality of of the culture of our work, something we all really need to be mindful of and navigating. And so just thinking about that as you're posting the job, like where is it going out and how are you getting the word out to get to youth and young adults who might want to do this work. So we get into hiring practices now. This next part is really gonna be a lot more internal. And this is where, if your YAB is willing, right? So you got to check in with the YAB that y'all work with, the youth and young adults of that group, because they may not want to do this, and that's totally fine. And they might, and that might be cool too. But one of the things you can do when you're starting to look at this, like hiring, and we're gonna bring in folks, are things, and this applies. I'm gonna back up real fast. I'm sorry if I'm going too quickly, y'all. But On this piece around scoring and interviews, I want to uplift also that if you are a youth and young adult provider, this isn't going to just be practices you can use for hiring youth and young adults into the work. This is actually practice that you can use to hire anyone that's coming into the work, frankly, right? Engaging the youth and young adults, whether that's your YAB or if you are a YYA provider and you have youth that are a part of your system and know your system, engaging them in the process of hiring is hugely beneficial. At Life, I used to work in an organization called LifeWorks. That's where I was the coordinator of the Austin Youth Collective. LifeWorks in Austin was a multi-program youth and family services organization that did, runaway and homeless youth services, foster services, school, case management, rapid rehousing. And they had a ton of, they were like the kind of the go-to youth and young adult service provider for the city of Austin for 25 years or something. That's how I knew them, because I had been one of their clients. And one of the things that they got really intentional about doing, and it was during YHDP that this happened, was bringing the YAB in, because the YAB they asked for this, right? But bringing the YAB in to have them really work with the HR department around defining what are we looking for in a candidate for a role here, right? Defining like what is needed in this role, what are the like priorities that we're seeking, who's designing the questions that we're asking in an interview, right? Deciding that's going to tell us like what we need to know. So the youth in LifeWorks, and that wasn't just for hiring for YHDP projects, that ended up and now is actually like practice at LifeWorks, that they engage youth and young adults in the process, both of designing the interview process and being a part of and being people who do the interviews. So they did this before I came in, because when I was hired, I actually had to go through 2 rounds of interviews, and both rounds were solely with, I did a phone interview with the person who would become my supervisor. But when I was interviewed by the Austin Youth Collective, and I had to do 2 interviews because the YAB couldn't as a whole meet on the same day. So I did one interview one day with a group that could be there, and then I had to come back and do a second interview with the group that could be there. And ultimately, they hired me because the YAB said, when they brought me in, they had already had a person that had gone through this. I learned about the job posting late, and they had a person that they were already like creating HR paperwork for. And when I came in and said like, oh, I'm interested in this, here's my application, da da da. And I went through the hiring process, and I went through the interview process, who would become my boss went to the YAB and said, okay, what do y'all think? Right? Because at the end of the day, they had already started to get ready to make an offer to someone. And the YAB said, we want her because, she recognizes that she doesn't know what it's like to be homeless now, but she's also slept under the same bridges that we sleep under, right? She knows things that like this other person who just graduated from college is really earnest and awesome, but they do not have that same connection to what it is to move through the system that she does. And so it was actually the YAB that chose to hire me. And the organization valued that input to the point of it becoming, they never made the offer to the other person and instead made the offer to me. So when we're talking about hiring practices, again, this extends beyond just hiring youth and young adults. Like you can engage your YAB in that hiring process for like all of the roles in the organization or in the company if you want, right? There are ways to do that, and these are a couple of the ways that you can do that. I'm gonna pause and take a breath. We have a discussion next, if y'all want to jump into that. But does anybody have any reflection on this before we move to the next slide? Okay. Well, this next thing I'm going to really ask y'all to really actually start talking, right? Because this is for y'all, this piece. We have a couple of questions that are kind of up for discussion. We're not going to do breakout rooms today. It's not a very large group today. So I think we can really just do a group conversation. And so really, I think let's dig into that first question is currently, like, how are youth leaders and diverse community partners involved in job position design and selection for your various organizations? I'm going to stop screen sharing and I will drop that question in the chat. But I do know when we do discussion, it's nice to be able to look at each other. Although it does look like I might be the only one, me and Aaron are the only two on camera. But yeah, how are youth leaders and diverse community partners involved in job design, position design and selection currently? Or are they? It's okay if they're not. This is new, right?
So I'd like to comment on that, if I may. This is
Please.
Sonia. Hi, good morning. And forgive me, I was late. But what I've seen is like trending, right? It's like the trend. I'm seeing that other organizations are starting now to be acclimated in the sense of more youth-led organizations, or they are building like their own governances. Um, I have an 11-year-old who kind of was asked to participate in an organization, and she went from being like a intern and really quickly becoming a commissioner. But when I see her doing the work, I'm like, oh my God, like hold on, like this just happened like in the last 3 weeks, right? Because she is participating in their community outreach projects, and she's also part of like the committees and decision making. But just to see her elevate to that position has been really neat for me to watch. And then as far as us and the Llamas Housing Project, we continue to support all of our, yeah, GAB members. There's a few that live out here in the Hemet San Jacinto Valley, and I try my best to stay connected or try to just continue to bring value in the sense of resources or continue to invite them to like our job fairs and things like that. But just listening to you and this whole, beginning of the presentation, it just really, I want to say put a stamp on, my goal one day is to be able to teach, our leaders, what I do, right? And my skill set and my stuff is around development and stuff like that, which is a skill set that's not really heard of. But there is a few out there that have, showed some interest. So just super excited, to continue to support. But I wanted to put my input on the trend that I see in youth leading organizations.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you, Sonia. Yeah, I mean, I think that's
Yeah.
the thing, right? Is this is where it is a trend. It is a thing that's starting to happen more and more. And so having kind of some of these um just like guideposts in place, right? I know, like again, with YHDP, I know that there are some roles that would be amazing roles to be filled by youth and young adults that are coming out of the projects that y'all selected, and so this is really just kind of considering like how can we do that, Kimberly, I see that you put in the chat that at Norco you involve youth in hiring youth mentors, but haven't seen them on the hiring teams. I think that's awesome. Can you tell us more about the youth mentors and like that process? Do you mind? You don't have to. I know, and if we can wait if it's in chat only today, I get that. Monique, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, so for folks that don't or aren't familiar with my story, I'm also someone with lived experience who has been hired on, and my position came about wanting to start really emphasizing the needs of young youth and young adults and creating a youth pipeline system in our county, right? Anywhere from efficient services to tailored subpopulation services. And so I know that I do not account for all of the experiences across all the different systems of care, but I have been in multiple systems of care, if not all of them. And so that's very difficult to navigate while working in this field. And so the need to be able to relate to others, right? We have some folks who had participated on a lived experience advisory board that came from technical assistance through HAP. And so that has been really helpful to have a group of adult partners who also have lived experience and learning how they navigate in their roles, but also in our system of care, knowing that they're someone who's just on the other side, but was recently on the homelessness side. Through that, right, expanding our youth action board has been huge. Being able to work with youth on our YAB and just really hear their stories, their perspectives, their input has been amazing. I don't think I need to do any training with them along, what should be changed or what we should do to make things better. I think it's always how do we go about it in our county, knowing that our county has a lot of regulation tape and has a lot of procedures and policies in place. And so part of it is now learning to be those young professionals in that role with that lived experience. And we've appreciated partnering with RUHS Behavioral Health, who hires all of their peer specialists who are folks with lived experience. And so having our YAB members also participate with adult partners who have lived experience, and sharing that space and that knowledge has been huge. So thank you all for always listening to my story, and really appreciating and valuing everyone else's, and valuing what they bring to these spaces. So I really love the conversation thus far. Reed, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Monique. You actually kind of segued us into our next thing. So we have this other conversation we could talk about. Maybe this one right here that I just dropped. Why don't we hold that and we can revisit it after the next kind of topic and see if like that can spark some things that maybe we all might already be doing and just don't have this lens on it yet. Because something that you said, Monique, really does kind of lead us into this next conversation, which is like, um what is your organization trauma informed, right? What are trauma informed care practices? We talk about trauma informed care in this field left and right every day. Most of us have some type of training in it, and it is almost exclusively discussed as the trauma informed care that we provide in our services to the youth and young adults, or the people that are, of any age that we are walking alongside that are experiencing homelessness. The question I often ask, and the thing I'm bringing here with this is your organization trauma informed in terms of the policies and procedures for staff? Because I think we often overlook, like, whether your staff member is a person that has lived experience or not, the work that we do is extraordinarily intense and extraordinarily close to very real trauma, especially for people who may be recently housed or are currently, when we work with youth and young adults on YABs, sometimes in some YABs, they are actively in housing crisis while showing up to do this work, right? And so we think about, like, what are the practices within your organization that are already there? Because that's what we talk about when I say the thing about, well, we don't want to, like, we're not trying to square the peg, we're trying to round the hole, right? Like, that's what I mean. What is your system? Is your system prepared? So when you think about bringing in folks, and again, this is in the context of we're hiring youth and young adults, but I want to be really clear. All of this should apply to any one of the staff that y'all, like, any one of your organizations, because at the end of the day, we are all human beings. And this work, again, it gives you proximity to secondary trauma, to all kinds of things that, like, people maybe aren't necessarily prepared for, don't necessarily know that's coming when they come into this field. Maybe they do, but if this is a part of our work, is navigating. Aaron said that one of the things I often say is the wholeness of humanity, right? We're trying to offer and honor the wholeness of us as human beings. That applies to everyone across the board. It can be really complicated, and it makes it kind of messy, but it also makes for better work, because at the end of the day, we are here to see what an end to youth homelessness. We are here to ensure the youth and young adults, or anyone. I mean, in my dream world is we see an end to all homelessness, but with the focus of YHDP, it's on youth homelessness. And that work can only happen when we are able to really build that relationship, to be able, like, last time when we were on a call, this space, there were so many folks here who were working in kind of a siloed place, and we were having this awesome conversation, and one person realized this other person, they, like, kind of are aligned a lot in their purpose, mission, the work that they do, but they don't know each other because they're in these siloed positions, right? So creating these kind of trauma informed spaces allows for that relationship building to strengthen your work, right, across the board, whether you're hiring a young person with lived experience, or you're hiring a young person just out of college, or you're hiring an old person with lived experience, but it doesn't, whomever you're hiring. So you want to think about what are trauma informed care practices for your organization. Are you engaging in proactive planning, right? Like, we know how hard that can be. I don't know, judgment. Being proactive is not easy because you cannot plan for every eventual outcome. But most of us have been doing this work long enough to go, ooh, even if I don't know what our potential outcomes could be, I do know that we have other communities to look into. We know where there are lessons learned. So really engaging in, like, what are the lessons learned and how are we planning around what we know, with the understanding that we're going to learn more, right? Holding your staff accountable, but in, like, clear, understandable, and respectful ways. This is a huge one. Accountability seems to be a big struggle across the board. And I'm talking all the way up to the top. Like, this is not just like, there is no shame in this game. This is everybody, right? Like, accountability is a struggle. Our culture treats accountability though as though it's punishment, right? When we are speaking about accountability, we are speaking about opportunities to learn, grow, and mitigate harm. That's what we're talking about, right? So when you're working with a youth or young adult, or you're working with somebody with lived experience, and yeah, particularly a young person with lived experience, being very clear about what the role is, what are you supposed to be doing, what is expected of you, right? And being very like not having these like it's like it's about your approach, right? How do you have the conversation? Oftentimes we do these harms. I love it. I love it, William. The A word. Yes. We can sometimes cause a lot of harm in the ways in which our system is designed when we look at things like first warning, performance improvement plan, final written warning. Like these things are very, very steeped in a white dominant culture that does not recognize a broader like diversity of experience and existence, right? So part of our job is to really be looking at like what does our kind of accountability process look like. And I'm sorry, I'm just getting distracted by the chat. And how do we make sure that it's very clear and that we are approaching people with respect, right? Sometimes I feel like I shouldn't have to be teaching this to people, but sometimes you kind of do, right? Again, to the point that we're all human, and sometimes, like, people are just irritated that day. Um, we want to make sure that we are implementing positive supports, right? What identifying and working with, like, I don't know if y'all are familiar with the concept of strengths model. It's a case management concept. It's super dope. It's this idea of like, what do you want to do? What are the skills you have in place to do them already? Let's build those skills out. And then what skills can we add to get you where you're trying to go? Implementing that kind of an approach of like, you're super amazing at, I don't know, I'm trying to think. There were a couple of things that were earlier. Oh yeah, you're super good at like planning and updating and maintaining a calendar, but you might need a little bit of, so I'm just using that as an example. I'm not saying the person who said that has this other side. I'm just using an example because it was there. But maybe like you struggle a little bit with like, I don't know, public speaking or speaking up in a meeting. So identifying together, like, what are the supports that we need in order to do this job well, to move forward the work of seeing liberation and an end of home and an end to homelessness. You want to use restorative approaches, right? It's rather than punitive. How do we build? How do we take this, we learn, and we grow? And we want to model respectful and nonviolent relationships and restorative practices again. This is something that folks with lived experience of homelessness, especially young people, maybe don't have a lot of experience around, frankly, right? I mean, it's different if you're 40 and you've been on the street from if you're 20, right? Like it's a different thing. Like what you have been exposed to as a 20-year-old is not the same thing. And so part of the role of our organization and our work and our policy and our procedure is to model what does it look like to create healthy boundaries, what does it look like to create and hold them, maintain them, right? Structure is not a terrifying thing. Look, I have I don't know if y'all can see this, but I got a little anarchist A tattooed on my neck. I was young once. I'm just telling you, sometimes structure in the chaos is really necessary. So how do we create those things, right? um More kind of trauma informed care practices, right? Offering transparency about your why. If I'm in trouble, it will also like, okay, so that includes engagement goals and why, how this person was chosen. But it's also like, if you're coming to me to tell me I did something wrong, be transparent about what's going on, right? Again, I want transparency in what my job expectations are. If I did not meet them, let's talk about how we can support me in meeting them, rather than being like, you failed, you did this wrong, da da da, da, right? Talking about why are we, like, what are our goals, why were you chosen, what can we do to co-develop what this role might look like, because that is a thing that people do all the time in this field when hiring positions for people with lived experience. And I'm going to just tell you all this right now, aside from youth and young adults and including youth and young adults. If you have created a role that you are explicitly looking for somebody with lived experience to fill, do not, please do not go, but we're going to co-develop this together. Because what happens when you say that's what you're going to do is like, we're going to hire you into a role that we're going to co-develop. This is not an intentional thing, but very often what will happen is, when and if mistakes are made, because they're going to be, because it's a brand new thing that's never been done before, the most vulnerable person is the one that is most often the one that will face the consequence of that, right? And we've seen it. I've seen it left and right and across the nation. This is it's just a thing that if we are talking about what co-development means, then when you are offering that as a role to somebody saying, we don't quite know what you're going to do yet, but we have these options, I would deeply encourage you, provide people with the parameters. You know what the hard no's are. You know them, especially like for those of you at the COC that are working in a county position, that are working for the government. If you were under any type of a government system, of like even an education system, if you are working within the bounds of red tape and policy, be extraordinarily clear about what that means, right? Like offer that to people and say, we want you to be able to create this thing, and we know this, and this not doable. So we're just not even gonna, we know we can't do it. We know there's a hard line there. I always tell people that when they tell you that you can't do X, Y, and Z, that's only 3 letters, right? There are 23 other letters in the alphabet. You can try other things. The rules are just telling you what you can't do, right? You can develop what you can do together, but you got to be real explicit about what those lines are, because otherwise you're selling something that's not true, right? And then you're really taking, like, to my opinion, you're taking advantage of somebody, because you're having them put all this work into something and then telling them, oh, by the way, sorry, red tape doesn't let us do that. Sometimes that's unavoidable. Sometimes we don't know, right? Frankly, a lot of these big systems have a lot of red tape that even the most expert in them might be like, oh shoot, there's this line right here that I just overlooked and it means a lot. But so being as transparent as possible, huge key factor in working with youth and young adults, and really with anybody. Offering wellness check-ins, support opportunities for learning. Again, just checking in, like treat people like they're human. Just like, I guess, like, I don't know. When we talk about that, we're saying like, hey, this isn't going to be easy. Monique uplifted it. That's why I moved us into this piece of the conversation. Monique uplifted it when she was speaking earlier about what it is to come into this work as somebody with lived experience and not necessarily be quite prepared for what that does to your spirit, to your body, to your experience. And so making sure that when you are hiring youth and young adults or hiring people with experience, that you're offering those opportunities for folks to kind of check in and be whole people, right? Where it's like, can I have a conversation with you, like Ree to Monique, rather than like TA to like recipient, right? It's like, let's be human together, because there's some struggle going on and I need support, or whatever that might be. Remember too that great leaders identify and amplify the strengths of their team, right? If you're building a team, like really uh highlight the strengths that you see in the folks that you're hiring. I think a big time thing that we overlook is that, I don't know how to say this, it's not going to sound, I'm a little sick, so my brain's foggy. Folks need validation, y'all. We all need it. We all need it in some level, in some way. Folks need validation and recognition and to be seen. And I think that we, as people who work in this field, are so accustomed to that being like almost one of the martyrdoms of being in this field, is like, oh, we're just going to do the work and no one's ever going to know we're doing it. And it's going to destroy us, but we're doing it because we're called to do it, right? That's a thing that exists as a part of the culture of nonprofit work, especially in homelessness. When you are hiring youth and young adults that are doing this work, do not expect that of them. Like, highlight the brilliance that they're bringing. Call it out publicly. Call it out in space. Get to know the person, make sure they're comfortable with that. Some people might not be, but like, if you're COC, I know in Austin, our COC did like a summer. It was a spring and an autumn kind of like all community meeting where everybody came and got kind of, anyone was invited. The mayor would be there a lot of times, and they would do just kind of like, here are the updates on the homeless response system in Austin. As a part of those meetings, they did like award recognition things where it was just like a little certificate of saying like, you did this great job, you did this thing. The first year that I attended one was our first year of YHDP, and the COC left like candy, handed out recognition to older adult partner staff who had been doing the work of YHDP, but they didn't say anything about the YAB. They didn't uplift the YAB. They didn't offer or call out. And I'm going to tell you, we could have called out at least 3 of those YAB members individually for the work they had done, as well as the whole YAB. And it was just an oversight. It was just something they didn't think to do, but it deeply impacted the YAB, right? Because they're seeing all these other people and they're like, well, why? We've been doing this work too. Like, hi, excuse me. We want to be able to hang something up on the wall in our office. Like, why don't we have that? So just keeping in mind that like, people deserve to be seen for the work that they do. It sucks that our system doesn't do that for us, but we have the opportunity to like leverage our proximity within the system to change that, right? And so here's an opportunity where you can do that. Finally, for language tips, just avoiding jargon, acronyms, that kind of passive voice or deficit based language, right? So, like, in fact, a great example of that, I did this is like, for the first session of this training, historic, because I've done it for a few other places, I developed it specifically for YHDP communities. The first session of this training is like, it was originally called Youth Collaboration Miniseries Session 1, Anti-Adultism and White Dominant Culture. And your COC leadership staff came to me and said, hey, we're not really comfortable with that title. And I was like, well, I'm sorry. At first I was like, I don't understand why this is what it's called. But we had a conversation about it, and they did like I was so grateful to them for this. They pointed out, like, we really want to avoid using that kind of deficit based language of like of like making it sound negative, right? Really what that session was about was exploring what those concepts were. So just shifting the language of that, right? Shifting the language of that title to, rather than saying saying, hey, what is adultism and white dominant culture? Just that shift, right, in our language opens up more people to be willing to hear, to be willing to receive, to be willing to be a part of the conversation. And so when we're doing this work individually in our organizations, keeping that kind of thing in mind really helps in doing this kind of, rather than saying like, you didn't do this right, say like, hey, maybe next time we could try doing this, right? Something, something along those lines. The basic things that you would hope most hiring managers or managers or supervisors would do already. But sometimes I think, again, in the rush of our jobs, we overlook those little pieces that really make it like, I'm often saying we're in that kind of, that tension between the sense of urgency and intentionality. And this is one of those things that sometimes can get overlooked in that, like, even by like folks who do this on the daily, right? So just a thing that we can keep in mind. So that was a lot of me talking. We have another discussion question if anybody wants to hop in on it, which is kind of, how can you change or contribute to a more trauma-informed process for hiring youth and young adults in your community? I'm going to drop that in the chat. I'm going to stop sharing for a minute so we can look at each other if you want to. But I would love to hear from y'all. Like, what are some ways that you can change or contribute to a more trauma-informed hiring process? Any ideas come up from this call today?
I think maybe like in terms of transparency, just like responding to everyone who applies in a timely manner. Just letting them know like, hey, we received your application, or unfortunately we won't be able to hire you, or congrats, we'd love to call you for an interview. Like just having a consistent communication process throughout that.
100%, Carolyn. Yes, I agree with that. That is perfection. Honestly, it is. Go ahead, William.
Yes, hello. Good morning, everyone. Just had add something I'd like to add to the point that you were making with regards to the accountability conversation, or the dynamic of accountability, right, in the this section, right? I forget what the title it is exactly, but something that came to mind as far as like having those conversations when it is time for accountability to take place is the tool of the crucial conversation outline. I don't want you to think, but I do want you to know. So moving forward, it would be great if helping to equip the youth or everyone as much as possible with tools like that to be able to have those more constructive based conversations when it's time for accountability. It's something that we use a lot on my end. So thought it would be something to help.
No, I love that. I'm familiar with crucial conversations, and if you have, especially if the city of Riverside has any kind of resource that they want to like share out around that, if y'all got a little, one pager that gets shared for you as a hire at the city, if y'all want to share that, we could put it together with these the PDFs that go out with this as things that to give access to other folks that maybe don't work there, because crucial conversations is that's a great framework. Another really good one is nonviolent communication, right? Is where you're like stating an observation, right? When I see this, this is what I experienced. I would like it if you could do this, right? So it's none of it is saying like you did a wrong thing. It's just saying when this happens, when I see this, this is what happens. in order to do this, I need this from you, and making it a question. Can you please do this? Is
Absolutely.
another tool like that. Yeah, 100%. That's
Good stuff.
awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else got any thoughts for like changing or creating a more trauma-informed process for hiring?
So,
Say again?
I saw Monique's hand, but then it went down, so maybe not.
I was going to say one thing that lots of organizations like to do is provide like questions on the spot so that people can't be prepared or put their best foot forward. But I have seen some organizations that send out their interview questions in advance so that applicants can be prepared to answer. Because for some people, speaking on the spot is very difficult, and it's not always a reflection of their ability to provide the information. So I've seen more organizations doing that now, where they provide general information about the questions that will be asked during the interviewing process. And I think that would be really nice if more people would do that.
I love that, Kimberly. There's an organization that does that in Austin, actually, that I think it's amazing. And the idea of like sending out those interview questions, like, so, Carolyn was saying we want to make sure we respond to all applicants in a timely manner. That's a huge one because it can feel you can feel disrespected. Like, frankly, like, I don't want to work for you. If I sent you an application and you come back to me 2 weeks later talking about, oh, we got your application and we want to talk to you. It's like, well, boo, it's been 2 weeks. Like, I didn't know. I've been looking for other work. Like, what do you like? What? My time is valuable too, right? Like I'm not trying to be disrespectful to anybody, but that is how I would feel about it. And I think as a part of that kind of that piece around making sure that we're replying to everybody that applies, even if it's saying we're sorry you're not the right fit for this role, but like we are excited and we have you for the next, we're however you want to word that, right? I think when you are following up with somebody saying we are excited to move you into this next round, right? If that round is a phone call, if that round is a because sometimes it's a phone interview first, and then you get to be brought in to do a panel interview. I see your hand, Monique. I'm not overlooking. I'm just gonna finish this all real quick. Sending out those interview questions ahead of time is such an amazing opportunity to let folks have a chance to like really think about, okay, there, because I want to know what you're looking for. And to Kim's points, like I'm pretty good at doing most things on the spot, but interviewing is not my strength. Like it's not. Like I'm good at it. You can ask me a question, I can talk on it for an hour, but that doesn't mean I'm a good interviewee, right? Because you're not supposed to talk on it for an hour. So just things like that, where I can work with somebody in my home to go, okay, they want to ask this question, and then my spouse can go, oh baby, you've been talking for 15 minutes. They probably want that answer in 3, right? So Monique, I saw you, please, next, and then Caroline, I just saw your hand come up and down, so you're on stack.
Mine is real quick, and it's between like a comment and a question, right? Like I think having learned from our so the COC started hiring on some of the members as student interns, or youth in our community as student interns, and we've learned a lot through that process. And so I think sometimes there's like a fine line between what is being equitable and what is like making a reasonable accommodation, or what's just general understanding, right? The youth including, right? I take myself, right? Like coming into this space, I needed a lot of leeway because I was still experiencing a lot of instability in my life. I had just graduated, but I still had to take care of family. And so having that flexibility in the COC was very helpful. And so I think there was always flexibility and always room to adjust to what I needed, while still learning that there was a lot of professionalism that I needed to account for. And I needed to learn it at some point, because not always was there going to be flexibility and or accommodations. And so I think with the student interns and our YAB members, I think we're all constantly learning what that fine line is between, okay, we want to be flexible and want to give you, right, all the ability in the world to do what we need to do and break down every barrier, but sometimes there are things that you just have to do, and it's a part of professionalism, it's a part of being in this space, it's a part of being timely, or right, meeting deadlines. And so I think we're always constantly battling with like, what is being equitable and what is being professional and how much leeway do we give and how much of like, right, like folks mentioned, the real world do we, you know, expect from folks coming into these spaces. But I think just taking it always as like it's a learning space, especially if this is the space, the first space that most folks come into. So I think just being very patient, and really wanting to check in, our goals aligning, our tasks aligning with overall life goals and overall, right? Like, what are your goals as an individual, but also what are you going through as an individual? And, you know, you can't say that that stays outside of work when you're, you know, you don't live to work. And so I think that's been very difficult even for myself to learn. And so learning alongside the app has been great. Sorry, folks. Thank you.
Don't apologize. You actually, again, provided a perfect segue to the next thing. I want to make sure I saw Caroline's hand go up. If you wanted to add a thing, I want to make sure we get you get hear from you.
Thank you. No, I'll just be really quick. Can you all hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. No, I just wanted to say, I think, you know, what I hear and what I try to do is that understanding like a trauma-informed approach is that sometimes people have like, I mean, well, everyone has negative experiences in life, right? And some of them are really impactful. And so to just really interact with people, right? To just have your interaction be positive, however that may look to you or however like they want to receive it, like, you know, getting questions ahead of time. Yeah, maybe I like that because, you know, it makes things a little easier for me. And you're trying to make this interaction positive. There's no reason for it to be a negative interaction, whether you're benefiting the company or you're not benefiting the company, or, you know, you're teachable or you have, you know, certain qualities somewhere, you know, as long as, you know, like you're benefiting like equally, like it could be great. Like there's no reason to, I don't know, just, you know, write people up or just tell them they're in trouble for something, or, you know, to like have those teachable moments. And then also like at the same time, like understand like as you do that, like people who have trauma, like also have like, you know, bodily reactions sometimes, you know, there's a lot of stress or like anxiety or whatever. And just to just be mindful of those things while trying to have a positive relationship with someone is, I think, helpful.
I really appreciate that, Caroline, as well. Thank you. You both kind of just both of you prepped us for this next piece, which is around supervision. I want to say a thing to Monique, to what you were saying, like around there has to be a balance, right? Between part of this is about like shifting the culture of our system, right? So it's about like you know that like it's, yes, people need to be accountable to the work that we do, but also we need to be mindful that we owe accountability back, right? It's not a one-way street. So if I work underneath you and I see that you consistently are, you know, and this is I'm just using examples. I'm not, there's no call out on anything that I'm saying because I don't know how any of you guys operate. But if I work underneath you and I'm seeing consistently that like you don't respond to emails, or you cancel things last minute, or you tell me, you know, oh, this thing is due and it has to be done this way, but then you don't do it that way because the position you have allows you not to have to do it that way. But if I'm watching that happen, then you're going to come to me and say, well, I need, because as an example, I worked with a young person who went into the field, and she came to me when she got her very first kind of like PIP situation. And one of the things that they had written on it was that she wasn't accepting calendar invites, and that they needed her to do that in order so they could be tracking where she was. So because they could see her calendar from the organizational side of things. But she was like, my boss never does. Like nobody else ever. Like if you go look at this, I couldn't tell you who's in a meeting based on that invite list or not on the calendar. So I don't understand why I'm in trouble for not doing that, but my supervisor doesn't have to do that. That doesn't click to me. That doesn't make sense. Like if you are holding me to be accountable to these things, you need to also be accountable to those things, right? And I think that that's a thing we often forget, or like don't keep in mind, is that like folks, especially with trauma, and this is not just people with lived experience of homelessness, to Caroline's point, everybody's got lived experience of something, right? That's the reality of the world that we live in. And often folks with lived experience are scanning. They are paying attention to everything going around them all of the time, because that is a requirement to stay safe, right? So if I'm seeing consistently that my leadership is inconsistent, then why am I being punished for like that? I'm going to feel that way, right? If I'm seeing that you are consistently inconsistent, and then you're coming to me and saying you're on a performance improvement plan for not being consistent, I'm going to look at you and go, uh I can pull the receipts. Like, do you need these emails? Because I have them. So it's really important that like what we are holding people to, we hold ourselves to, right? That like we are accountable. It's a bi-directional accountability. It's not just that the people you hire are accountable to the organization. The organization is accountable also to the people they employ. And I think our big system outside of homeless response system, but just big general, the way things are built, I think we often forget that like our system is not designed to have folks realize that like your organization is also accountable to you, right? You got to pay me on time. You got to make sure I've got my health insurance. You got all of these things. But part of that is also you got to be really clear about what you expect from me. And you got to be doing the thing. You got to be clear about what I should expect from you and be honest about it. Because that's what's missing so often is that transparency piece. I think I'm still on the discussion question slide. I apologize. So to move us into this concept of supervision, Monique, I agree with you. We need folks to be prepped for what it is to move outside of the work, because we're not always going to work with people who care about what our background is or who have trauma-informed concepts, right? You get out into any other field, they're probably not going to know it unless you're going into like healthcare or something along those lines. And so, yeah, there is a need to help support folks in developing to be prepared to move into whatever their next thing is going to be. I want to be really, these are some tips though, right? For things that when we are bringing youth and young adults into this work, ways in which we can work to really support them in being able to have this be a thing on their resume that they get to walk away and say, I did this, this, and this, and I learned these things from that, right? Like, because that's amazing. Because you're going to learn things that are outside of, the standard kind of what is professionalism. You're gonna learn all kinds of stuff. Sorry, I just got distracted by chat. Yes, first impressions make a huge difference. And young me, I'm glad you like this. That makes me happy. Okay, so supervision, really important. This work is relational. And Caroline, I think you were talking about that a little bit as well. Let me pause before I get too far into the slide. Young me, I saw your hand go up. Did you want to say something?
Oh no, that was an accident. Sorry for that.
Oh, okay, no worries. So yeah, this work is relational. Again, this is not something that should just be applying to people you're hiring with that have lived experience of homelessness. This really should just apply to like anybody that's working in your organization, like works with y'all. It's about building that relationship. It's about building trust as a part of our work. That is not normal to how we do these things, right? It is not like I have hired you to do a job. You are here to do a job. My job is to pay you to do your health insurance, do your benefits, and you are here to perform these tasks, right? Great. That's great. If I'm going to work at I don't know, an advertising firm, cool, awesome. Yeah, you're hiring me to write some copyright, and that's my job, and that's the end of it. This work is not like that. What we are doing every day is not that. This work is impacting who we are as human beings. To Caroline's point, shit can come up in your body. Excuse my language. I'm sorry. If you have trauma, stuff will come up in your body that you might not necessarily even. That's happened to me. That happened to me on a national call. I had a trauma response to something somebody said. It's actually kind of how I got into the work, actually. But I couldn't have stopped it if I wanted to, right? And I had to go figure out how to navigate. What do I do? Because in that moment, I might have acted out a little. I might get a little upset. But I have learned now, right? Because I work with youth and young adults who share stories with me routinely that are things that are absolute triggers to experiences in my past. And I have had to learn how to navigate what that means, right? It is not the job of anybody else to hold my triggers and my trauma. I have to navigate that when I'm in a workspace. And that's a part of the thing that I had to learn. And it's a part of the thing that we can create spaces for folks to learn in a space that is familiar with what that means, right? Because again, you go work in an advertising firm, you go work even like a front desk job somewhere, like they're not going to have all of this. This is not going to be conceptually things, right? To Monique's point. So when folks are coming into this work, do that work of building kind of relationship and trust as a part of it. Again, and I can't emphasize this enough, you want to clearly state expectations and you want to be revisiting them. This is a means that you can use to monitor. You can use it to go, if you want to say like, oh, you're super amazing at these tasks, and we know that there's some support needed over here. Well, now we've got these really clear expectations, and we can come back next month. I don't know how often people do supervisions. Maybe it's once a week, but you can revisit these things, right? And say, how's it going here? How are you doing with this? What support do you think you need? And let's be clear, sometimes you need to be offering options for support. Because if I walk into this field and I've never done a day of my life in this job, and all I've done has been like going through it on the other side, and you come to me and say, what do you need? I'm gonna be like, I don't know. What do you mean? What do I need? I don't know. What is there? What is there for me to have? So being clear about that as well. What supports can you offer? Also co-creating opportunities for youth and young adults to really just demonstrate what their skills are, show it off, because a huge part of this role and this work is showing. I was saying earlier that sometimes organizations or systems really don't value lived experience, and a huge part of the opportunity here is to work with folks with lived experience and really find opportunities and ways to highlight what their skills and abilities are to your broader community, so people can start to it can become normal, right? We're normalizing this as a reality, that lived experience and expertise is as valuable as 4 years, 5 years, 10 years of college, right? Because I'm going to tell you something. I'm often in rooms with people that have PhDs, and I'm looking at them going, I should also have letters after my name. I don't understand why I don't, right? You cannot judge somebody's like capacity for intelligence, ability to learn, or ability to adapt based on whether or not they have a piece of paper, and we know that. How many times have people been hired before that check every box on the page, and then they come to work and they don't do anything because they get away with not doing anything? I can think of a couple of examples of that in my own world right now. So be mindful of those things. You know what I'm saying? And then celebrating strengths and celebrating areas of growth. Celebrate that, because that's a part of changing that conversation and that culture of accountability. An area of growth is accountability, right? But it's also, that's what it is. You get to change. We're gonna be like, okay, we've learned this. That didn't work too great. But now here we have this chance to say, okay, well, we know that didn't work. So what are we gonna try next? And we're gonna do it together. Michelle, I see. Go ahead.
To speak on what you were saying about, working with others that maybe not be meeting the mark, I think it's important to highlight that when you're in a workspace and you're seeing that your coworkers or others aren't following the standard or the expectation, you shouldn't use that as a measurement for your own standards. You need to really function from your own set of integrity and work ethic, and not fall into that trap of, well, they're not doing it, so I'm not going to do it. You have to really decide for yourself who you're going to be as an employee, how you're going to show up every day, and not buy into what other people are doing or saying, because you have no idea what conversations might be happening with them and their supervisor privately, or if they're at the verge of losing their job. So you don't want to put yourself in that position.
Michelle, I actually really agree with you, and I appreciate you for uplifting that. I really do. I really do. I think that that's super legitimate. I think often when people are coming into this work and it's their first time coming into this work, they're learning who they are as a worker, right? This is not like going to work at like working in this field. I don't know. I don't know how to say this, because I'm not disparaging what other jobs are out there. I'm just saying they have different experiences, right? And coming into work in this field, oftentimes folks are developing who they are as a worker, what their integrity is, what their work ethic looks like. And oftentimes young people are looking to the people who have power. Understand that when you have been homeless, right? Like, or gone through any type of trauma, which most people know, you're deeply aware of the power dynamics, and you are deeply aware of paying attention to what's going on around you in order to stay alive and to stay safe. And you can't just cut that off. Like, you can't just turn it off when you're at work and be like, okay, my survival skills, my survival mode is down, right? I mean, I couldn't get out of survival mode for 15 years after being housed, right? That took years of therapy. And so I want to say yes and to what you're saying, Michelle. I think that's a perfect thing to have a conversation as a supervisor when you're working with a young person or working with somebody that's saying that conversation. I think it's a perfect conversation to be having. But the conversation is about, how do you want to develop who you are, what your integrity and your work ethic is, right? Like, I think you are on point. And I think, again, it's a yes and. I think there's just there are things for consideration at the end of the day. It's not to coddle, and it's not to make it easier or make it be like, oh, well, you know, I should be given, you know, kids gloves or whatever because I used to be homeless. It's just to acknowledge that like these the realities of what it is to be actively in crisis or to be very, very close to having just gotten out of it, which is often the case. Often when we're hiring youth and young adults, what I've seen across the country is they are hiring folks that have just been housed within the last 6 months to a year. And that is a very tenuous period in life outside of any workspace. In life, that's a tenuous period around trauma because a lot of things resurface the moment you start getting stability, and you're not really prepared for that. And so the ask in this is like, what do we do to create a culture in our workplace that allows for people to actually get opportunity to grow rather than has as comes in and says, if do as I say, not as I do, right? Like we're like, this is opportunity for everybody to grow, right? Not just the people that we're hiring. Um, I have one last thing I want to cover, and then there'll be room for questions and conversation, and then we're done. But I do want to go through one last thing because this is probably, and I close on this for the whole series because to me it is the single most important thing folks can take away from everything that we talk about. I hate how blurry that not equals sign is, but it's just I couldn't get the graphics right. I want you all to remember that when you are working with folks with lived experience of any kind, but particularly for those of you that are working with young people with lived experience of homelessness who perhaps have gone through your program and now are being hired to work there, you are going to hear things like, this could be different. This isn't right. Here's what I experienced. Here's what we're doing wrong, right? Here's what the gaps are, not what we're doing wrong, but like, here's where the gaps were, right? And for people who've been doing this work for 25, 15, 5, 10, whatever years, we know how impactful and how much this work takes out of us as people, right? And I think that sometimes it's very, very easy for folks to interpret this could be different as this place is bad, or this isn't right as what you're doing is wrong, or it's horrible, or I hate the organization. When I worked at LifeWorks, so I worked there, I was a client of theirs for I went through 3 programs with them. I went through a transitional living shelter, a workforce program, and their drop-in center program. That's how I met them. I met them through a drop-in center. And when I ended up going back to work for them, I was constantly going, oh, there's this, we could do this. This needs to be different. Oh my gosh, because I was so excited to be in that space. And one day my boss came to me and she goes, Ree, I have to tell you something. And I'm like, what? And we were I had a really good relationship with my supervisor. She was like, sometimes, dude, it sounds like you hate this place. And people think that you hate this place. And I like literally cried for like a week on that. Like it destroyed me because I was in my mind the whole time going, I love this place so much. It's done so much for me. There are so many things that I know it can continue. I know it's doing right now and could do better, could do more, could do differently. And I want them to do those things. And I see them and I know them and I'm excited. And they're hearing criticism. They're internalizing me saying, I hate this place. They're internalizing me saying they're bad. And I was sitting there going, no, no, I love you. I want to see you be better. I want to see you serve more youth and young adults. And there are new needs now that weren't there when I was a kid, like out on the street. And I want to encourage folks in positions who occupy that positionality of power, right? Like oh, what is the word? Proximity, that proximity of power. If you're in the power position working with somebody with lived experience and they come to you and they say, like, this isn't working, and this is something, frankly, that your community needs to hear all the time, I think, right? We all need to hear this. If somebody's telling you it's not working, it's not a reflection on your work being bad. It's not a reflection on the thing that you built being terrible. It's not a reflection on, it is not that. It is somebody saying to you, I have been through this system. There are ways that I see that it could be different, and I want to be a part of making that different. And if we can hold that framework rather than defensiveness around it, it absolutely shifts the tone and the way in which we can approach really truly seeing change in our work and in our culture. So if you take away from the last 3 sessions nothing else, please, please, please keep in mind that what you may be hearing is criticism because you have a very, very deep connection to the work that you do, which is real and valid and awesome and amazing. It is an opportunity. It is someone telling you like, I want this to be better for the people coming after me. It's not saying that what you've done is bad. It's saying that there is room for growth. And if we can, it's just in the same way if we're doing a supervision and we're not telling you you're bad, we're saying you got to do this differently. We're celebrating an area of growth. We have to be able to internalize and hear what we might feel like is criticism. We have to be able to pause with that and go, is this actually somebody saying that like I'm a terrible person who's done a really bad job? Or is this somebody saying like, oh, there are opportunities for this to look differently and to be different. And there are ways in which this could be improved to help, right? Because at the end of the day, we're all here for the same reason. You wouldn't be showing up to this work. I wouldn't be showing up to this work. Young people would not be showing up to this work if we did not want to see a better outcome for youth and young adults, and really for all people who are experiencing homelessness. And so I think if I can leave you with nothing else, I leave you with that to keep in mind when you go through these processes. So the last slide just says questions. And that's where we are. Anybody got anything they want to add? Any thoughts, final questions?
I'm so sorry, I have to jump a little early, so I'm gonna hop. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. It was nice being here. Bye.
Okay, it's just us now. Oh no, I'm the only one on camera. That's weird. I'm gonna do that. Okay. Does anybody have any final thoughts? Yes, I agree with that. 100% young me. Okay. Well, if y'all don't have any final thoughts or anything else you want to talk about, that really does conclude the 3-part series. For those who've been here from day one, I appreciate you so much for sticking it out. I hope that this has been helpful. If you were not able to attend one of the first couple of sessions, when this ends, it'll process the recording and then I will send it over to Monique and team. And you will be able to have all access to all 3 recordings. And I just really deeply appreciate the space that your community has allowed for this to happen. Savannah, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I was just gonna
Me too.
ask, oh, sorry. I was just gonna ask, are we gonna see any more of these kind of trainings in the future?
I don't know. I think that's a question for the YAB. And if that's something the YAB wants, I think there's opportunity here, frankly, for the YAB to be potentially like leading some trainings like this, if that's something y'all want. And I think it's big, yeah, bigger conversation. I think there's a conversation to be had around that. There are more trainings like this. If you want them, we can work it out with the broader core team. But for this session, this series, this is the last one of this particular series. I see you, young me.
Oh, did anybody want to talk? Sorry, I think someone wanted to talk. Alondra?
Oh, Sonia, did you have something,
It's
Sonia?
No, I just want to say that even though I'm not in the space yet of like hiring a full-on staff, and I'm working towards that goal right into the future, but I've been around for a long time, but this has been very, very valuable in the sense of equity value, you know what I mean? And just it really like it got to the core, right? So I'm like, wow, like I'm listening to you and I'm thinking of one of my affiliates, and she's very similar in the sense of like principles. So it just gave me a lot of valuable tools to be able to apply and make sure that we're doing it in the right direction, and I don't have a problem asking for help because it's okay, right? We're human at the end of the day, like you said,
Yes.
and we're all real people. So I could really appreciate today's presentation, today's training. I thought it was essential. So thank you. And I also could support the idea of future, just for, myself, and of
Yeah.
course the youth. Yeah. So
Well,
thank
that's what I
you.
was
Yeah.
thinking. You're very
Yeah.
welcome. Thank you for your
Yeah.
kind words. I appreciate that. But that's one of the things I was thinking. Y'all are moving into implementation eventually, right? You're doing your RFPs going through. For those who are not a part of the YHDP process right now, they're in a request for proposal phase. Project types or projects are being, applications are coming in, but you're moving into like, eventually you will have implementation. And these trainings in particular are very, very useful in implementation, and often are things that we will come do like during implementation for new hires. But one of the other options is getting, if the YAB wants to, right, is doing that kind of train the trainer. And then you've got the YAB here that could provide these trainings to new hires if they want to. I'm throwing out ideas. Nothing is required. But just that is an option as well, right, to think about. But we can also bring these trainings back for new hires if they're needed. Young me, please.
Yes.
I just want to say that I really like this training too. Not only to become a leader, but like using my words as a powerful tool. Because I noticed that recently, right now, it's how do I say it? I know that I kept trying to like process every situation and turn it into like my story into like an inspiration. So that's what I'm trying to say is like I want to like learn this topic too so that we can empower other people's lives and other people's voices that need to be seen and heard. And yeah, so I would like to continue this with everyone. So I don't know how Monique feels about this.
I think Monique might have dropped off, maybe. I don't see Monique here, but I think that's something that y'all can talk about in the YAB space, and I'm happy to, y'all tag me in whenever you need. But I will say, y'all are amazing. Thank y'all for that. This really does kind of wrap us up. So if y'all want to get a half hour back to your lives,
Oh,
the
yeah.
trainings and recordings will be up this afternoon. And I really just appreciate y'all so much for being here and being a part of this work. Keep up doing this amazing work.
All right, guys, I gotta chime off. Thank you. Okay. Yes. Bye bye.
Bye. And
Thank you, Ree.
William, if you have a resource on the crucial conversations, it's like a one pager. If you
Yes,
if you could email me that, then if it's okay, I'll send it out with the materials from today.
absolutely. You got it. I will.
Awesome. Thank you for that.
Alrighty. You're
Cool.
welcome. Take
Y'all have
care.
a great afternoon. Bye.
All right,
Thank
bye.
you, Ree. Bye.
Oh, Young Me, please get better. All right, friends, I'm ending the call. Have a great day.